Hello and welcome into the Sun Devil Source podcast, as always presented by Jones Auto Centers and Jones Ford Verde Valley. I'm your host, Jacob Brooks, and as always, I'm joined by our Sun Devil Source publisher, Chris Cartman, to discuss ASU football's upcoming road trip against the Baylor Bears, which will be this Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Arizona time. You can watch live on Fox. Later in the episode, we'll be joined by Sun Devil Source staff writer Joaquin Rodriguez to help break down all the nitty-gritty of what the Bears have to offer. He's been researching them all week, as well as we'll also be joined by a special guest, Garrett Ross, who covers the Baylor Bears for Bears Illustrated, which is part of Chris, that 247 Sports Network. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that later in the episode. But Chris, before we can get to any of that, we have some major Sun Devil Source news to tell everyone about, which is that on the evening of Monday, September 29th, between 5:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m., we will be joined by ASU football head coach Kenny Dillingham for a live podcast event at RAC Scottsdale, which is located in the heart of Old Town Scottsdale. This event is going to be free to attend for any members of the Sun Devil Source Devil Sanctuary community. So if you're watching or listening to this right now and you are a member, be sure to send Chris an email at chris.cartman@gmail.com or just message Chris directly on our Devil Sanctuary board with your name and the name of people who would like to attend with you for the event. The first 100 guests who RSVP directly with Chris will be entered into a VIP package raffle. That VIP package will include a booth that can fit 4 to 6 people at the event, with over $100 worth of food and beverages included in this booth, as well as a case of Sly beverage, a bottle of Devil's Vodka, and a bottle of El Bandito Yankee tequila. We're very excited to spend half an hour discussing ASU football's rise, the current state of the program, how the team's outlook is for this season with the man himself, head coach Kenny Dillingham, as well as many other subjects surrounding the team. People who attend will be able to watch and listen to this live, as well as visit with our publisher, Chris Cartman, in person after the podcast concludes. More information can be found on the Devil Sanctuary in a post recently created by Chris. And if you have any questions, you can send them his way. So, Chris, that was a lot. Just to kind of recap it real quickly. On September 29th, we will have Arizona State football head coach Kenny Dillingham live in person for a Sun Devil Source podcast episode at RAC Scottsdale. We're really excited for this, Chris. So what more details can you tell us about the event?
Super fired up. This is a great opportunity for Sun Devil Source members in the Devil Sanctuary. We have a lot of people who are diehard Sun Devils to come out to watch Kenny Dillingham interview with us on our podcast in front of a big turnout of fans. And it's going to be at RAC Scottsdale in the heart of Old Town Scottsdale. Very easy to get to for most people in the Valley. Coming off of work, Dillingham will talk around 6 to 6:30 for about a half an hour. Our sponsors, Devil's Vodka, El Bandito Yankee Tequila, drinkontheslide.com, and Devil's Liquor have really helped us to be able to put on this type of an event. And I know that ASU fans will turn out for this. It's a really unique and exciting opportunity. It's right after ASU's game against TCU on a Monday evening. People can bring out their family and looking forward to this. When we had a similar event, sans Dillingham, of course, but in Atlanta next to the team hotel at a bar there before the Peach Bowl, we had many members of the Sun Devil Source community who showed up. They all wore name tags with their usernames on the board, and it was a great time for everybody to be able to meet and mingle. We want to be able to do that again as many times as possible, and this opportunity to visit with Kenny Dillingham is the launch of our opportunity to provide these types of opportunities to the best ASU fans who are members of Sun Devil Source.
Yeah, Chris, it's going to be a really exciting event that you guys won't want to miss out on. But speaking of exciting news, there was also some exciting news surrounding the Arizona State program today that broke. 2 podcast episodes in a row. The big ASU news drops right before our episode. The news that broke this morning was that ASU is reportedly preparing to play a game against the University of Kansas at the Wembley Stadium in London, which would be the first ever college football game played in that historic venue next year. So the game would be on September 19th of 2026 in what would officially be week 3 of that year's college football schedule. There are a few things that still need to be finalized before this game can be officially announced by Arizona State University directly. So, Chris, what can you tell us about this ongoing situation and how it could potentially affect ASU's future in terms of scheduling?
Yeah, so I've known about this being in the works for several weeks now. It's still not finalized. And the reason for that is that ASU needs to officially get a schedule move of its non-conference game against Hawaii, which was going to be played on September 19th on this date, to either week 5 or week 6. And Kansas needs to get its game against Middle Tennessee State, which was going to be played also on September 19th, to week 0. Now, a few important things. Number one is this is a home game for Kansas, as it will count in the Big 12 schedule. So ASU is not losing a home game. Secondly, this is a Big 12 game that will count toward the conference standings, and it will be the season opening Big 12 game for both of these teams. Now, as you correctly said, this would be the very first game of any college football significance, played at historic Wembley Stadium in London. It's a 90,000 seat venue. That is a very big deal, very big opportunity. Everyone, of course, will be watching this. Tons of money will be generated by this. But there are some challenges associated with putting this into the schedule. Not only the ones in which I already mentioned about moving Hawaii or Kansas needing to move Middle Tennessee State, but ASU is scheduled the week before to play at Texas A&M. So this is a very difficult 2-week stretch at the very outset of ASU's non-conference schedule next season, after the team opens the season on September 5th against Morgan State. That Morgan State opponent, it was set recently, which I first reported after Bowling Green had earlier pulled out of its schedule. So as ASU plans to have its early 2016 slate, would be September 5th, ASU hosting Morgan State to open the season at Mountain America. September 12th, ASU at Texas A&M in College Station. And then likely ASU would travel directly from College Station or nearby Houston to London for a game on September 19th against Kansas, Big 12 opener for both of those teams at Wembley Stadium in London. The goal for ASU would be to get a bye week immediately after this so that it can have that recovery period after this early 2-game difficult gauntlet, and adjusting the body clocks coming back from being whatever that is, 8 or 9 time zones ahead, or maybe 6 time zones, 7 time zones from where they're going to be in College Station, to adjust back in Tempe with a bye, and then a game against Hawaii, which should be kind of an easier game, of course, followed by the remainder of the Big 12 schedule. Now, a couple other things that I've heard about this. Number one is that Michael Crow, my sources have said, is a big advocate of ASU playing in this overseas game in London, in part because he wants more exposure to the university, which is trying to expand its ASU online into the United Kingdom in the near future. And then also the Big 12 with Commissioner Brett Yormark have talked extensively, including at Big 12 Media Day this year, about the desire to expand their brand into international markets. People will remember there was a game already this season that was in Ireland, the Aer Lingus Classic, played between Kansas State and Iowa State in week 0 to open the season. And there will be more games like this at other international venues. So this was an inevitability for ASU, and the decision has been made to pursue doing this in week 3 next year against Kansas in a Big 12 matchup, week 3. And, Sun Devil Source will be there.
Yes, sir, we will be. Now, time to move into some news that surrounds ASU's matchup this week. Not going super deep into the future, thinking about international play. We're talking about this week against the Baylor Bears. With the new Big 12 injury report rules that we covered at the beginning of this season and in the preseason camp time period when these rules were getting introduced, both teams, ASU and Baylor, have to submit official injury reports to the Big 12 ahead of the game. And because of that, we have some insight into what the injuries are going to look like for this game. Looking at the injury reports, Chris, it seems like Baylor doesn't have anybody of significance who is listed as either out or doubtful. However, as you're going to get into right now, there are some key guys missing on ASU's side.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kenny Dillingham is very transparent about injuries historically over the time that he's been at ASU. So it's not as though these things were catching us off guard when they went up on the Big 12 website on Wednesday night, as they will every week for the rest of the season and beyond. And even before we get into the injury report, I just want to say this is a very important thing. It's a level of transparency that, in my opinion, is necessary in an era of college sports betting, and when the potential for a lot of information to be known but not publicly disclosed that could influence betting markets were it to be out in the general public. And so to mitigate any potential misuse of that private knowledge, I think that injury reports is a very valuable thing. It makes it much easier, of course, for us to be able to discuss these matchups and all of the variables that are included in that. And yes, ASU, a team that really was able to stay healthy for almost all last season with most of its star players. Yes, Cam Skadabu missed one game, Sam Leavitt missed one game, and Jordan Tyson didn't play in the last 2 games in the postseason, which were the biggest of games of them all. But ASU really was a pretty healthy team for the most part last season. The outset of this year has not matched that to this point because Xavier Alford, ASU's all-conference safety, who was playing at less than 100% early in the season, he did not play against Texas State. He is not going to play against Baylor, and he's expected to be out for a few weeks at least, according to Kenny Dillingham. Other injuries of note, the biggest would be Jalen Moss, ASU starting slot receiver. He hasn't been out there on the field healthy the last 2 games. ASU's lived in 12 personnel with 2 tight end formations, primarily because of not having Moss on the field. And so that means that, again, the Sun Devils will probably play mostly 2 tight end formations with no slot receiver. And it means on defense that the Sun Devils will have to rely on Adrian Boogie Wilson at that free safety position instead of having Xavier Alford. Now, a great performance in his first start by Boogie Wilson, but the challenge ramps up quite significantly when you got to go up against this Bear Raid attack with Sawyer Robertson and Trigg and some of these other weapons that Baylor has at its disposal. And then some additional less meaningful, but still not entirely unimportant injuries for ASU. Montana Warren, who's played about 40% of the snaps at nickel behind Kendrick Breedlove, the starter, is questionable at best with an undisclosed injury in terms of the specific nature of that. And then Cyrus Fiaseu was dinged up in practice on Wednesday that we saw, and he is listed as questionable. And Zach Swanson, who broke his foot in a practice at the end of ASU's spring schedule in April, hasn't played yet through the first 3 games, and he is listed as questionable as well. And then Canyon Floyd, ASU starting punter, who did not play last week against Texas State due to a quad injury, according to Kenny Dillingham, is also listed as questionable, which would mean if he did not play, that Matt McKenzie, ASU's Australian edition punter, who kind of underwhelmed in his first attempts, first 2 punts last week, would handle the punting duties. The positive news for ASU is that Kyson Brown is listed as probable after missing last week's game with an ankle injury. Of course, Raleek Brown has been stellar to start the season in the non-conference, one of the top rushers in the Big 12, in fact. And Kanye Udo had over 100 rushing yards against Mississippi State before falling back quite a bit in his reps against Texas State. So there's a bunch of guys who are either out, questionable, or probable for ASU. Not really a great start to the Big 12's first official injury report.
Well, Chris, a lot of information that we just covered over the last few minutes. So we'll be back with our full breakdown of ASU's matchup against the Baylor Bears after a word from our sponsor over at Jones Auto Centers.
For over 60 years, the Glenn Jones name has been recognized for integrity and honesty.
And the Jones Auto Centers in Wickenburg.
Jones Verde Valley.
Take a nice country drive out to Buckeye.
When you're talking about Arizona's best, you're talking about the Jones Auto Group. It's quick, fast, strong.
I want to invite you to visit our new facility in Casa Grande and enjoy our country-style way of doing business. We're the Joneses.
Welcome back into the Sun Devil Source podcast presented by Jones Auto Centers. Be sure to, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, check out the description portion of this podcast because you can contact Parker Jones directly through phone or email if you are interested in buying a new or used vehicle from one of Jones Auto Center's many dealerships throughout the Valley. Parker Jones and Jones Verde Valley have been huge supporters of ASU's NIL efforts over the past several years, so we're proud to have them as our sponsors of the podcast, and that gives you another great reason to make them your go-to if you live in the Valley and need a new or used vehicle. All right, now it is time for us to give our detailed breakdown of Baylor's offensive and defensive schemes. So I want to welcome in Sun Devil Source staff writer Joaquin Rodriguez, who's been knee-deep in all of the Baylor stats and notes and anything that you can think of with this team, writing up his article about the upcoming matchup. So Joaquin, I just want to get straight into it. Baylor's offense is referred to as a bear raid offense led by quarterback Sawyer Robertson, who has been praised by Kenny Dillingham as a guy that's going to be tough to game plan for. What can you tell us about Baylor's offense?
Well, yeah, what's important to know about Baylor is, for starters, last year, they started off kind of slow, 2-4 to start the year. Then they ended the year on a 6-game regular season winning streak, one of the hottest streaks in the country. And Kenny Dillingham spoke about it at his Monday presser. Had it not been for Baylor losing one of those early games, one of them being a Hail Mary loss to Colorado in the final seconds that eventually went to OT where they did drop the game, ASU might not have found itself in the Big 12 championship and going on that legacy season all these ASU fans remember. So Baylor kind of ended the year on a hot note, tried to take that into this season, and they kind of started off shaky, losing a home loss to Auburn 38-24, but then they went on the road to Dallas to then rank number 17 SMU and picked up a win after being down by 14 points late in the fourth quarter. Sawyer Robertson, like you were saying, he had two connected for two deep touchdowns, a 25-yard and a 45-yarder late in that fourth quarter to force it to OT and eventually win it in double OT. And then last week, of course, they beat Samford 42-7, a blowout win in preparation for this ASU game. Now, going into that Jake Spavital ran offense, he obviously coached at Texas State for 3 seasons, then went over to Cal, was the OC there before Dave Aranda brought him in to be the OC here at Baylor. Now, the key to Jake Spavital's offense is a few things. One, he's going to take vertical shots. He spoke about it as pressures. He likes to take 10 vertical deep shots a game. That's what he looks to do. But with that said, he's going to do so with downhill running game and try to get it to bounce off each other and play complementary football. Now, he's going to do all this in 11 personnel typically. Now, in that personnel, the running back is going to be Bryson Washington. Now, he was a preseason all-conference running back for the Big 12. Then at tight end, the 11 personnel, one tight end. Their tight end is going to be Michael Trigg. He's a 6'4", 240 athletic frame guy. Kenny Dillingham spoke about him this week. He's one of those guys Kenny Dillingham recruited out of high school when he was over at Florida State. And he's one of those guys Kenny Dillingham expects to see play on Sundays in the league. Now, of course, like we said, Sawyer Robertson leading the way as the signal caller for the team. Sawyer Robertson and currently this year has 1,000+ yards, top 2 in the nation in receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns, the second most, tied for second most in the country. Now, who he's looking for on that wideout? Baylor has 4 receivers with 10-plus receptions this year. They have Ashton Hawkins, Josh Cameron, Cole Wilson, and Kobe Prentice. Now, Ashton Hawkins is their team leader in receptions, 17 receptions for 257 yards. He's their slot receiver. He's a guy you're going to see run slants across the field. But the thing about him is he has that speed to take a boom ball. Against SMU, he had a 30-yard reception where he blew by a DB. So he's one of those guys you can see in the middle of the field against ASU's zone coverage defense and also take over the top of that secondary.
Look, this is a difficult team to prepare for. They have broadness and diversity in what they're doing across their offense with a quarterback who is extremely knowledgeable in their scheme and understanding all of the personnel around him. They return almost all of their starters. They have continuity with their coaching staff. They understand their identity, what they're trying to be. They play fast. For an air raid style team, they still run the ball reasonably well, and they're dedicated to doing so. They spread you out to run the ball, meaning that they make it harder for opponents to be able to get enough defenders coming in and around the box to be able to handle that. They'll still go with some gap scheme runs out of 11 personnel. They play Trigg, their star tight end, everywhere you can imagine on the field. He's going to be attached. He's going to be in an H-back. He's going to be flex. He's going to be out on the perimeter. So that creates challenges, mismatches. And then what Baylor really is able to do quite well is spread the ball around in its passing game, which is something that you see as a hallmark of most of these types of heavy spread or air raid type offenses. They have Ashton Hawkins. He's a 168 pound slot guy, 6-year player. They'll put him kind of everywhere on the field. They'll move Cole Wilson. They'll move Kobe Prentice. These guys will line up kind of anywhere on the field. They have a really big body receiver in Josh Cameron, number 34. He's 6'1", 234 pounds. They're going to try to get him into mismatches and situations, allow him to bully opposing defenses. I think one of the key things that Joaquin touched on there was the ability of Baylor to get some one-on-one matchups in the slot, either on the boundary side of the field or the wider side of the field, to try to exploit opponents that don't have great coverage options at those positions, whether that's a nickel if you're in a 4-2-5, or maybe you can get that on a linebacker, which most teams aren't going to play against air raid. You're going to either be in a sub package nickel or a base nickel, which ASU plays. And the tempo can go pretty fast, especially after first downs. There's RPO components to what they're doing. That's designed to lull defenses into getting their eyes in the wrong places, to maybe they're tired and they've lost their focus a little bit. And that's when you slip those blockers who on screens would be the lead blockers. You slip those guys beyond the defense, and that is what you get some of these big play opportunities. And look, Baylor was able to have a pretty good offensive day playing against Auburn. Not an easy situation when you're playing against an SEC team. They still had reasonable production. The following week, they then had this comeback double overtime win. That was a high scoring variety against SMU, ranked, I think, 17th at the time. This was a college football playoff team last year. Baylor was able to put up a ton of yards, a ton of points, many explosive plays all over the field. That's a really good indicator of this team having the type of offensive potency that's going to be a monumental challenge for ASU and really even for the rest of the Big 12. Sawyer Robertson in that game, he threw 50 times, I believe. Like, he had a 440-yard passing with 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. And then they still had Brian Washington run for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. You had Josh Cameron, who's the receiver that I mentioned earlier, who's got that 230 plus pound type of a physique, who's really difficult because of how he can box you out, what he can do at the catch point. He had 9 or 10 catches, a couple touchdowns. Ashton Hawkins is a guy that they're able to move around like some of their other weapons to try to prevent teams from keying in on where those guys are going to be and how they're going to be utilizing them. This is a very, very significant challenge right out of the gate for ASU to open Big 12 play.
Like you said, Chris, it is going to be a challenge for ASU's defense, especially trying to stop that Bear Raid offense without all-conference safety Xavier Alford, who, as we touched on earlier, won't be playing for ASU this week and potentially not for multiple weeks. So with that in mind, Joaquin, I want to go back to you. What do you think are the keys for ASU's defense without Alford to try and contain this Baylor offense?
Well, yeah, a few things stuck out. First, Chris referenced how Bryson Washington had 100+ rushing yards against that SMU team. If you look at that, he had almost 30 carries in that game. I think it's going to be important for ASU's D-line to hold up and keep Washington contained without having to need the help of those linebackers and secondary to get down low. Because what Spavital wants to do is he wants to get that secondary looking in the backfield, peeking in the backfield, falling for those play actions. And without Xavier Alford, the veteran of that secondary group, it's going to be hard to keep that D-line. As we saw, that secondary struggled against Mississippi State. They fell for a couple of boom balls on play action. So it's going to be important for the D-line to contain Bryson Washington and let the secondary take care of that Bear Raid offense.
Yeah, you have to win at the line of scrimmage. Bottom line, this is a big boy football game, played on the road in Waco. I don't think that Baylor's offensive line is one of the strengths of its team. I'm not saying that it's a bad group by any stretch, but ASU spent this whole offseason getting bigger and stronger at the point of attack. Remember, this was a team that led the Big 12 in run defense last year, and you're going to be called upon right out of the gate to have a big-time performance. CJ Fight, Jacob Kingaika, Clayton Smith, Prince Dorba, Justin Watley, Elijah O'Neal. They're going to have to do their job. Jordan Crook, Keyshawn Elliott, they're going to have to play with reckless abandon and passion and be able to plug those gaps. And really importantly, I would say this is the biggest matchup yet for Miles Rouser and Kendrick Breedlove. Now, both of those guys had a big play breakdown against Mississippi State. ASU gave up 3 long touchdowns. They were responsible for 2 of those. And what happens against a team like Baylor is you need your safety and your nickel player. Nickel's on the wide side. Boundary safety is almost like an extra linebacker on the boundary side, the short side of the field. You need those guys to be able to make good run recognition to come up and help stop Washington, but also not get caught coming up prematurely in a way that allows those RPO slants to get on those receivers working inward from the slots. Okay, that's a big potential thing that ASU is going to have to do a very good job on. And then ASU runs a cover 3 defensive scheme. What that means basically is they divide the field up in deep thirds. And what you can't do if you're the Sun Devils is you can't give up plays that are catches beyond the defense. Nobody can catch a ball beyond Javen Robinson, Keith Abney, or Boogie Wilson, because that is when you have the catastrophic breakdowns that make it hard to win a game like this on the road if you're the Sun Devils. You can allow those short to intermediate completions in front of you, and you have to make Baylor drive the ball on 8, 10, 12 play drives before they even get into the red area or to scoring territory. And then when they're in a tighter, more restricted area, you have to be able to force them into field goals and not convert those drives into touchdowns. If you're ASU, keep Washington from having a big day on the ground by winning the line of scrimmage, get good play from Miles Rouser and Kendrick Breedlove in those key alley areas of the field where they're going to try to exploit you with their RPOs and their quick game, and then not give up the big plays behind the defense. If you're Boogie Wilson and Keith Abney and Javen Robinson, that is a recipe for ASU hanging in there with a good enough defensive performance that ASU's offense, should it play up to par, be able to escape with a road win from Waco.
So with that in mind for ASU's defense, I want to turn it over to Baylor's defense. Baylor's head coach Dave Aranda is a noted defensive mind. He's regarded as one of the smartest defensive minds just throughout the Big 12. Joaquin, what can ASU fans expect from Baylor's defense in terms of talent, returners, the schemes that they could be running, and how they could match up against ASU?
Well, yeah, like you said, Dave Aranda is a well-respected coach across the country for his defensive schemes. Now, his base defense is a 3-4, so that means he's always going to have 3 D linemen lined up against the O-line, but the secret is that 4. You're going to have 4 linebackers on the field almost always. Now, the key to that team is they're going to have those 4 linebackers. A lot of times, 3 of them are going to be on the O-line or 4 of them are going to be on the line, but the key is he's only going to send 2 to 1. So there's only going to be 4 guys actually rushing Sam Levitt at any given time. But the key is for Sam Levitt to detect which guys pre-snap are going to be rushing him and which guys are going to drop back into coverage. Dave Aranda does a good job of dropping guys into coverage of where he thinks Sam Levitt likes to go on certain plays. Like first and long, let's say he thinks that Sam Levitt likes to hit those slant routes across the middle of the field. Now, Dave Aranda is going to drop those guys into coverage where he thinks Levitt is likely to connect on those passes. Now, the key to the Dave Aranda defense is 2 linebackers, Keaton Thomas and Amarion Winston. Keaton Thomas is a guy who's their do-it-all linebacker, almost like Jordan Crook for ASU. He's a guy who can go sideline to sideline. He currently leads Baylor with 30 total tackles and is top 10 in the country in solo tackles with 18. Now, Amarion Winston is a guy who Dave Aranda is going to want to send to the quarterback, but also has that ability to drop into coverage. Amarion Winston's their leading tackler. He's the guy who's going to make tackles in the backfield, going to get the running back. And now, with that said, Dave Aranda's defense has surrendered 180 rushing yards per game. So although they only redshirt 4 guys, it hasn't been productive this season. So it's an interesting thing to see how Marcus Arroyo and Sam Levitt are going to utilize the run in this game against a defense that has struggled against the rush, but still makes it difficult for a quarterback to decide when to hand that RPO off or when to pull back and drop back into the backfield.
Look, unpredictability is the enemy of quarterbacks. And Baylor is one of the more unpredictable Big 12 teams on the defensive side of the ball because you don't know where the players are going to be pre-snap and you don't know where they're going to go post-snap. They make it more difficult for a quarterback to identify with their pre-snap alignments what they're likely to be doing post-snap. And then the post-snap picture when the ball is snapped is moving in different kinds of ways. And that makes it very difficult for a quarterback, especially someone who hasn't played against that type of a defense before. What Baylor does at the line of scrimmage is it's going to have its 3 down linemen, but sometimes there's going to be a 4th guy, an outside linebacker who's going to be basically playing an edge roll. And then sometimes it's going to have 2 outside linebackers that are on either end of the down defensive linemen, and that's going to be a bear front, which is basically 5 guys that are basically right there playing over ASU's offensive line. But some of those guys are going to drop back. You're going to have a DN drop back into a place where, as Joaquin said, you might want to run a shallow slant or a cross in route. You got to be aware of that if you're the opposing quarterback. Sometimes they're going to drop a defensive tackle over to the middle. So let's say you want to run those mesh concepts that bring the receivers underneath, and a quarterback, he's only worried about the linebackers typically and where they're going to be in maybe an underneath zone coverage. Okay, guess what? Now you got to look out for a D tackle who might be in the way. And who's going to be rushing? It could be 2 linebackers with 2 defensive linemen. It could be your nickel unprotected. It could be an overload with a nickel and a linebacker. It could be a safety coming down. It could be a corner cat blitz paired with a linebacker. So they bring simulated pressures. They don't blitz a ton with 5 or more, but they make you think that they're going to, while you not knowing which of those guys are going to be actually coming. Now, the positive news about this for ASU and Baylor's other Big 12 opponents is that the execution of this has not been particularly good at the outset of the season. They've had a lot of coverage busts and assignment breakdowns, which, by the way, you would kind of expect the more that you ask players to know and be able to execute. This is the downside of the unpredictability to that team. They are unpredictable in their ability to execute all of the challenges that they are being asked to do. So what has happened quite a lot to Baylor is they've had guys in the wrong place and they've been gashed. They have also struggled in the run game with gap fits. So opponents have been able to run for, I think Joaquin said 188 plus yards per game. That is the 14th mark in the Big 12. So opponents going to be able to try to establish the run, try to force Baylor to bring more guys into the box to create easier pictures for a quarterback to understand where they're going to go with the football. And oh, by the way, Baylor is willing to play a lot of man coverages with these looks. You kind of know when it's man coverage based upon the attention and focus that the defensive players on the perimeter are putting on the receivers that they're over. Now, sometimes that can be a quarters coverage look, which is like man, and that requires a post-snap diagnosis because a quarters coverage allows for a lot of quick game throws to be completed underneath the defense, while a lot of press man, which Baylor shows, allows for opportunities to hit on big plays behind the defense. So this requires a really good game plan, savvy crafting by an offensive coordinator, and also a good job of diagnostics by an opposing quarterback pre-snap and post-snap, and really adhering to working through the proper progressions that are called for on any given play.
So the last time that ASU went on the road this season was obviously the road loss to Mississippi State. And in that game, at least in the first half, ASU's offense looked a little rattled in his availability following the game. Sam Leavitt has talked extensively about how he thought that that wasn't his best game. He thought that he wasn't as prepared as he could have been. He thought that he didn't execute as well as he could have with little things like footwork and his analysis pre and post snap of the defense, which, as we were just talking about, Chris, is going to be really important this week. Joaquin, I want to go over to you. What do you think are going to be the offensive keys for ASU to try and capitalize on the shortcomings of Baylor's defense that they have in the running game and also those MAs like Chris was talking about?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing is up front, ASU's offensive line is going to have to handle these simulated pressures. If you get Levin in a position where he has to read the defense and also worry about getting sacked the moment he drops back into the pocket, that's like set up for a disaster. Like you need to protect Levitt, give him a chance not only to drop back, but also give your running back a chance to exploit that defense. Like we said, Chris talked about 188 plus yards per game. If you give Raleek Brown a chance to explode for a few runs like he did against Texas State, I think that's a recipe for success. And on top of that, do what worked against Texas State. We saw those early down checkdowns, high percentage completions to Chimama Terry. We saw him get a career high against Texas State. I think all of those things together can formulate to not only exploit Baylor's defense, but get Sam Leavitt comfortable in a road environment that we see in his first conference game of the season.
Look, football's won and lost at the line of scrimmage, with all other things being close or reasonably close to equal. And the bottom line is that ASU's offensive line, even though it has done a good job of creating some big run opportunities for ASU to get explosives with Raleek Brown or Kanye Udo, it hasn't been consistent enough at being able to get those blocks, and it hasn't been consistent enough at handling the sort of asymmetric, difficult to predict patterns of opponents rushing. And that's where the Sun Devils have to get better, in my opinion. The slipperiness of NAU and the approach that was a little bit unexpected, coupled with the way that Texas State took some gambles and tried to slip guys into gaps in an unconventional approach, prevented ASU from winning the line of scrimmage with enough consistency to just overwhelm its opponents in some of these games, especially in the first half. And when Baylor presents an opportunity to not know who's rushing, what gaps they're coming into, is there going to be an overload pressure from the edge? Is there going to be a stunt from the inside? Are they going to show mug pressure and bring it? Are they going to drop? What is that going to look like? That makes it very difficult for an opponent. And ASU just has to get better at being able to anticipate and have everybody on the same page about what they're trying to do from a blocking and protection standpoint with Ben Coleman at center, with Sam Leavitt. And then very importantly, Sam Leavitt's going to have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. You can't hold the ball, and you can't throw jeopardy balls. But above and beyond anything else, not to bury the lead here, you got to run the football really successfully right from the outset. ASU is going to be in a lot of 12 personnel looks. That's 2 tight ends, as we said earlier. Look for Shimon Mateer, Kamari Anderson, Cameron Harpole. You get those guys in the cut splits where you bring the receivers and tight ends really close to the offensive line. That creates a lot of surface areas, allows you to be able to capture the edges. Baylor has not done a very good job of being able to hold up at the point of attack on the edges. ASU exploited that against Mississippi State last year to Cam Skadabu's 200 and something rushing yards. It did it this year against Mississippi State. You got to run the rock really early, and then that creates more opportunities to get some tight end screens, some slips. You run some play actions where it looks like it's an inside zone, but the tight end slips out the backside and he's wide open. You get the ball to Raleek Brown, a little quick screen. You get some tunnel screens, maybe to Jordan Tyson or somebody else. And then again, remember I said Baylor plays a lot of man coverage with some of these pressures. What does that mean? It means big play opportunities are going to be available for a Malik McLean or a Jordan Tyson or a Jaron Hamilton, and ASU hasn't been able to take advantage of these as well as it has had the opportunity to. There've been a couple that have been just barely missed. Jaron Hamilton last week against Texas State. Well, ASU is probably going to need to hit on 1 or 2 of those at least in a game against a team like Baylor.
Well, Chris, I just want to sidebar real quick before we get into our keys to an ASU, and I can't help but notice the artwork that you have behind you in this episode. Once again, can you kind of let our listeners and viewers into the story behind those paintings?
Super cool. Chris Roach, ChristopherRoachArt.com. Really noted local artist, does a lot of works that's not related whatsoever to ASU football, but he also happens to be a huge ASU fan and alumnus, and he has done a lot of art, including some things that are here on the walls behind me. I have the Camp Tonazona water tower that you see there behind me. I have the original on my wall. It's for sale right now. If you go to his website, ChristopherRoachArt.com, you could check that out. There's also prints. I got Pat Tillman on the wall. I have Jake Plummer. I have a signed version of the Jail Mary catch by Jalen Strong. And there's Keith Poole and Eno Benjamin and a Cam Skadabu. I got one of the prints behind my wall. That's got to be one of the more popular ones right now, right? And this is not like the typical ASU type stuff that you hang in your house or your apartment. It's not Mountain America Stadium, and it's not like the generic things. These are conversation pieces. These are really, truly pieces of art that are special and unique. And I don't use those words lightly. And you can get them. Just go to the website, check it out, send him a message, make sure he knows that we sent you. He told us that traffic's been up quite a lot since we've been featuring his work on the podcast. And he's a longtime member of the Devil Sanctuary at Sun Devil Source. And so we're super excited to be able to feature the art of somebody who's that talented on our podcast. And we're back now with Garrett Ross, who covers Baylor for Bears Illustrated. He's a beat writer and producer there. Garrett, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Doing awesome. Looking forward to making my first trip to Waco. I've been all over the state for games and other things, but never to Waco. So before we even jump into your thoughts on Baylor and this game, what words of or suggestions do you have for ASU fans who are visiting Waco as far as cool things to do, places to eat, or anything else?
First thing I would say, just be mindful of the traffic. So right now they've decided that they want to tear up the interstate as football season gets going.
Of course.
Which is fantastic. So be mindful of the traffic. I think come in early. Waco's really easy to get around. You're not going to get lost or anything. If you're into the whole Magnolia, Chip and Joe type stuff, you have the silos here. There's a lot of antique places, places to eat. There's a ton of areas downtown near the stadium and everything. You could do like Bubba's 33 is really good. They have a wide variety of food there, like bar type food. Locally, a lot of Baylor people, they'll go to George's. It's kind of like a hole in the wall. Get a Big O there that they have for their beers and just have a good time. So check out those couple of places. And really, if you just walk around downtown, there's plenty of things, shops and all sorts of stuff you could find. It's turned into a tourist spot, so you can make way down here.
Cool, appreciate it. So Baylor ended last season on a really great run and has a lot of players back from that team. So how have you been struck by the non-conference double overtime win over SMU, which was in the college football playoff last year, and seemingly playing a reasonably decent game against Auburn, though losing, and Samford, blowout wins? What are your kind of general thoughts about what you've seen so far?
I think the offensive line still needs to improve. I've been kind of not necessarily disappointed, but they haven't played to the level that they're capable of playing this year. I think the rushing attack hasn't lived up to the hype because of injuries that have been suffered. You were hoping to have Bryson Washington and Don Pendergrass as your 1-2 punch there. Then Pendergrass suffered a season-ending injury in fall camp. They haven't had him. You've had to rely on Caden Durham to come in, Caden Knighton to come in, and he's good. He's a freshman from Oklahoma. He's super fast, but his best attribute is catching out of the backfield, so utilizing him in that asset is good. I think Sawyer Robertson and the receivers that he has to work with have been really effective, but there's times where while he's put up really big numbers, he's been super inaccurate, and it kind of caught up with him last week. He's had some balls the first couple of games against Auburn and SMU that probably could have been picked off that weren't, and then Stanford was able to get him a couple times this past weekend. I think their weapons on the outside are super elite. When you look at Josh Cameron, Cole Wilson, Ashton Hawkins, all of those guys are really good. They're dynamic playmakers. And then Kobe Prentice, the Alabama transfer, while he doesn't have a lot of receptions on the season, he makes the most of them. He has 3 or 4 touchdowns inside the red zone on 6 catches all year. So almost every time he's catching the ball, it's a touchdown. So you got to watch out for him. I've been impressed with their tight end room. I think they have some depth there. Michael Trigg is their main tight end. He's going to be an NFL prospect. He got hurt in the first half against SMU. If you go back and watch, that's when SMU really started coming back into the game. Baylor couldn't really match them score for score, relying on Michael Trigg. I think he's going to play this week against Arizona State. He sat out last week against Stanford. No real need to use him there. And defensively, we haven't really seen what their secondary is capable of doing. They haven't really been pushed all year. You thought Auburn was really going to do that with Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, but Jackson Arnold ran all over them. They had no reason to have to throw the ball against Baylor. So I'm interested to see how the secondary holds up against Arizona State's offense. But overall, I think there's a lot of positives to take away from Baylor, but there's still a lot that you want to see, that this team is better than what they've shown.
So what things are you kind of looking for to see from Baylor's offense against ASU in this matchup that will be indicators of how the game might unfold?
I think their offensive line really needs to get some push. I think if you can consistently run the football against Arizona State, then you have a chance in this game. I think keeping the ball away from Sim Levitt and Jordan Tyson and the explosive playmakers. Y'all got 3 running backs that you can just rotate in and out there. I think really kind of playing the time of possession game and not letting Arizona State's offense cut loose on you is going to be key to Baylor. I'm not sure that they can do that.
So Dave Aranda's a defensive guy by nature and heart, but then this transition to the Bear Raid has sort of included a deterioration of their defensive productivity at the same time that their offense has really exploded, right? So can you just walk me through the philosophical evolution of Aranda and what's happened in the last year or so and where the team is at right now on the defensive side?
The journey of Aranda has been so weird at Baylor because when he first took the job, you got hit with COVID, and nobody was expecting that. Your first time ever trying to do anything. You're building a team. The transfer portal's hitting. He got hit with all these different waves at one time, and they had to adapt on the fly. Then you put together the best team ever in 2021, and then you've kind of struggled with the transfer portal, identifying players. I think trying to figure out how to balance being a coach a head coach and be mindful of the defense has kind of gotten to him and spread him a little thin. You brought Matthew Powledge back in from Oregon, hoping that he could take over and be that defensive coordinator last year, and he just wasn't ready for the moment. And Aranda had to step in and be hands-on with that. And then this year, or the past couple of years, he's gone in and said, I'm going to take full control of the defense. And I just think that he's not able to put all of his energy and time. Like, if he solely was the head coach or solely was the defensive coordinator, I think you could see things look a little better. But he's trying to do multiple things at one time. And the talent evaluation has been kind of suspect. They've had guys that they brought in that they had really high hopes for, that for whatever reason, whether it's scheme or just trying to put different pieces together year in and year out like you're having to do now, you don't consistently have a roster that you could bank on for 3 years of talent. I think he's just kind of struggled finding his rhythm there. And it's just kind of all come to fruition right now where – and the game, too, has changed so much since he was just a coordinator at LSU that I think it's just a matter of adapting and trying to find out what works for him to get the most out of him as a whole as a coach.
So then what kind of needs to happen for Baylor fans to feel more confident on the defensive side of the ball progressing through the Big 12?
I think you need to see more consistency. I think you need to see an ability to stop a rushing attack, especially if you go up against a mobile quarterback like Sam Levitt. I think he's going to have a big game this weekend. When you look at the rest of your schedule, I mean, you got Josh Hoover at TCU that you're going to have to contend with. And all of these, we know how great the quarterbacks are in this league. And then you throw in like Kansas with Highshaw, or like y'all have 3 running backs. It's just difficult. They got to figure out a way to stop the run. If they can't stop the run, then I don't have any faith in this team. And like I said, the secondary, we need to see it. They've been inconsistent this whole time under Aranda. They've got names, but they need to prove it. So that's kind of where I'm at with the defense.
Yeah. So what would you say your keys to the game are? And you've kind of outlined that a little bit, but keys to the game. And we're going to have a Q&A up with you on the website as well. So I kind of already know your prediction, but can you walk us through what that prediction is and how you arrived at that decision?
Yeah, so I've gone back and forth with this. I like Arizona State 45-42. I think we're going to see a shootout in this game. I don't necessarily have confidence in either one of these defenses to slow down the other's offense. For Baylor, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier with the Arizona State perspective. Keep the ball away from that offense because they're going to put up numbers all night long. Right now, the inconsistencies with Baylor have me concerned. It's there with the rushing attack, but it's just Bryson Washington's getting banged up. I think he's getting too many carries. I think that's something that's going to hinder them, but I think it's going to be a shootout. I don't see any way Baylor's defense stops Arizona State's offense, and kind of vice versa with that. So I think it's going to come down to the end of the game. Whoever can come up with a big turnover or squeak out a field goal is going to get the win, and I like the Sun Devils to do it.
Well, we're going to find out. I'm going to be there. You're going to be there. Make sure that we get a chance to say hello, Garrett, and appreciate your time. Garrett Ross, Bears Illustrated, does everything there. They do a great job. Looking forward to meeting up, and hopefully some ASU fans take his advice about some of the things that he suggested about the trip to Waco. Thanks, Garrett.
Appreciate you, man.
All right. Well, thanks again to Garrett Ross for the time and helping us get an inside look at the Baylor Bears from somebody who's been covering them all season. Now, for us, I want us to get into our keys to the game for ASU to potentially come out with a very needed Statement Road victory, as well as our predictions for the overall score. So we're going to start with you, Joaquin. What do you got?
So I got the score being a 31-28 ASU win. And my keys to winning the game are going to be 1, establishing the run early on in the game with Raleek Brown. He had that coming out party against Mississippi State. Did well against Texas State, had that 75-yard run for a touchdown. So establishing the run with Raleek Brown. And then second being the O-line, giving a little bit time to drop back and read the defense. Those 2 things are going to be keys to ASU walking out of Waco, Texas with a win.
I see this as a game that is actually somewhat favorable for ASU, despite being on the road. And the reason I say that is because Baylor's not been particularly strong at the line of scrimmage and given up a lot of rushing yards. And that is the strength of ASU's team. That is the bread and butter. ASU should be able to get some explosive runs, to move the ball fairly consistently on the ground. That should allow for a little bit better rhythm and comfort with Sam Levitt. I really think that Marcus Arroyo and Kenny Dillingham have a much better understanding of what they need to be and how they can accomplish that now versus not really understanding that quite as well at the outset of the season. And I think Sam Levitt is starting to settle in. He had a high PFF grade against Texas State. His athleticism and his ability to make things happen with his feet and his play extension against a Baylor team that's had a lot of blown assignments and coverage busts could be an asset that allows some big plays after the initial routes. I think ASU can have a very strong offensive performance in this game. There is a very low likelihood of ASU shutting out Baylor on the other side. That is not something that I would expect in any type of way. I think Baylor's going to hit on some explosives and move the ball and be successful. I just don't think that it's going to be able to convert all of those into touchdowns. So this is a game where I can see a lot of field goal attempts, and the value of Jesus Gomez being really prominently on display for the Sun Devils. I think we're going to get a game with a bunch of field goals. I'm picking ASU to win 30-27 with 3 field goals by Gomez being the difference, including a long one of 50 or more yards being key in this game.
Well, Chris, some of my keys to the game are going to be very similar to yours. I think the biggest thing for me is going to be if there can be some sort of deep down the field connection between Sam Levitt and somebody that isn't Jordan Tyson. We saw last week that after Kenny Dillingham and others made it very obvious that ASU wanted to get other guys involved in the passing game, they found ways to get Shimon Mateer involved with the season high in receptions, just kind of giving him those short and intermediate mesh routes, those crossers, just to kind of get him the ball, get him in space, and let him work. And he did great with it. He had his first touchdown of the season. But I think the key is going to be, as I want to go all the way back to when Joaquin was talking about Baylor's defense, they are going to try and disguise coverages and create situations where they know Levitt is going to be looking for Jordan Tyson 20 to 25 yards down the field. And if Levitt is able to analyze the defense, know which guys are coming at him, know exactly how much time he has, and then if Marcus Arroyo is able to put Jaron Hamilton in a position to succeed, somebody like him on the outside, get a deep play or something like that, to have somebody like that make an impact on the game, I think that could be the difference between winning and losing straight up. Because I think that this game, as I'll get into my score prediction in a minute, is going to be a road shootout. I think it's going to be one of those games where if ASU walks out with a win, it'll be an ugly, high-scoring win when you look back at a lot of plays on film and you're like, why did we give up that touchdown? Well, maybe it doesn't matter because you come down and you score again on your own on offense on the other end. So my official score prediction is going to be a 1-point ASU victory, 38-37. I think, like you said, Chris, field goals are going to be a big factor in this game. I think that ASU is going to be down 31-37, but come down and score a game-winning touchdown drive to just kind of kickstart some momentum heading into conference play that I think the team needs after getting kind of, as Kenny Dillingham and Sam Levitt both said, kind of punched in the face against Mississippi State. I think that that's exactly the type of victory that could ignite the team. And I think that if the ASU offensive line is able to protect Sam Levitt long enough to connect with those guys deep downfield, the ASU will be able to come out with the victory. So that'll do it for all 3 of our keys to the game and score predictions and just the whole overall episode for Arizona State going up against Baylor. The 3 of us, myself, Chris, and Joaquin, will all be in Waco, Texas to deliver you guys Sun Devil source coverage from the entire weekend. We'll land there a little over 24 hours from now is when our flight actually is to Dallas, Texas. And I'm really excited. I know Chris already has a barbecue restaurant trip planned for us. I know that it's going to be a lot of fun going on this trip with the 3 of you guys. What are you guys looking forward to with it?
I've never been to Waco before. I've been to games in Houston and Dallas and San Marcos. I've been to Austin. I've been to Lubbock, right? I've been everywhere in Texas, but never to Waco. And so this is an opportunity to see a new Big 12 environment. They have a really nice stadium, and I'm expecting it to be a great situation. So it should be fun.
Yeah, well, I'm from Texas, born and raised, so excited to go back home, get some breakfast tacos, eat some barbecue with the source staff, and hang out. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, well, that'll do it for this episode. Like I said, we will be in Baylor. So if you guys see us there, be sure to say hi. Me and Chris will have our post-game show on the field after the game is over. Joaquin will have all of his written coverage with the gamer as well. Thank you, Joaquin and Chris, for coming on this episode of the pod. Huge thanks again to our special guest, Garrett Ross, for coming on the pod as well. He does great coverage over there for Bears Illustrated. And just want to reiterate what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. We will have Kenny Dillingham on an episode of our Sun Devil Source podcast live at Rack Scottsdale on September 29th. Be sure to reach out to Chris via email, chris.carbon@gmail.com, or to him individually on the Devil Sanctuary board for details and how to get involved in the VIP raffle. Thank you all for watching or listening to this episode wherever you get your podcast or video podcasts, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day.